This video is going to cover Unit 33, Section 3, determining functions of given angles and determining angles of given functions. What does that mean? Okay, to determine the function of a given angle. That means that we are going to find the ratio when we're given an angle. For example, let's say that we've got a triangle here, and the reference angle, we'll call it 30 degrees. Okay, so that reference angle is 30 degrees. What I'm going to look for first is I'm going to look for the sine of this angle right here. The sine means that we're looking for the opposite over the hypotenuse. Okay, so here's how we do that on our calculator. Let me zoom in a little bit. Now, if you're using one of the Texas Instrument graphing calculators, be sure that you are in degrees and not radians. I think it's the mode button. Hit the mode button and yeah, I think that's it. If I had one in my hand, I could be more clear on that. Okay, so I am in degrees on my calculator, and I am looking for the sine of 30 degrees, and that's going to give me my opposite side over my hypotenuse. So I hit this. Let me zoom in a little bit more yet. There's my sine button right there. Sine, cosine, and tangent. And above the sine, cosine, and tangent, you'll see a sine with a -1 over it, and a cosine with a -1, and a tangent with a -1. Now we'll get into that more in a few minutes. Those deal with when you're given the ratio and you're asking to find the angle. Right now we're given the angle and we need to find the ratio. So I'm looking for sine, so I'm going to hit sine, and then just 30 because I am in degrees. So it pops up like that, sine of 30. And if I hit equals, that gives me 1/2. So that means that my opposite side is 1 and my hypotenuse is 2. So this ratio is 1 to 2, or 1/2. So that just means that it's a 1 to 2 ratio, or a 2 to 1, depending on which one you're looking at first. Okay, so let's say that, so I knew that sine of 30 is 1/2. But let's say we have one that it doesn't work out to be quite so neat. Okay? And let's say that the angle is 35. 35. So on my calculator, I'm going to hit that same sine button. Sine of 35. Then I'm going to hit the equals. And what I get is the sine of 35 is equal to 0.57357, so on and so on and so on. So let me round it to 6 right there. Okay, so what does this decimal mean? This is still going to be the opposite over the hypotenuse. So that is this ratio. If I were to put it on this triangle very similar to the way I did it here, I would just say that the opposite side is, so this over 1, okay? So 0.57357 3, 6, and if you rounded it further, that's where you would round it, and that would be to 1. So if you notice, this angle got just a little bit bigger than 30, and the ratio got just a little bit bigger than 1/2. So this one would be, another way to write this one would be 0.5 to 1, because 1/2, 0.5 over 1 is the same as 1 over 2. So this is just a little bit bigger than 0.5 to 1 because that angle is a little bit bigger. So when we'll get into this in more detail later, but as we increase our angle, our sine ratio increases as well. And we'll do more detailed stuff on that. Now, let's see here. So most of, if not all of your scientific calculators are going to have sine, cosine, and tangent right on the front, right? You don't have to get into any menu. You shouldn't have to get into any menus in order to use them. I know the TI calculators, the graphing calculators, they're all right on the front, but those calculators are very heavily menu driven. So to get to some of the things, you need to get into a menu, but I don't believe that you have to get into a menu in order to use sine, cosine, and tangent. Maybe on some other graphing calculator you might, but I would doubt that. They should all be right on the front. And all scientific calculators will have them on the front. Okay, so they go over a couple examples on page 844. And then they use, I believe they use spreadsheets. Once again, I'm not going to use spreadsheets. And so let's go to page 846 and let's look at some of these examples here. 7 through 36 has a whole bunch of them. Let's try cosine of 4 degrees. So number 12, cosine of 4 degrees. So in my calculator, I'll hit the cosine button this time, cosine and then just 4. That equals 0.9976. All right. And let's just look at a couple more. Let's look at number 20. Number 20 says the sine of 0.86 degrees. So let's look at that. So sine 0.86, that is equal to 0.015009. So we'll just leave it right there. So that got really small, so then sine followed it and went really small. So let's take a look at just below that, just below halfway down on page 846, we're dealing with some of the inverse functions. Okay, so cosecant of an angle, angle A, is equal to 1 over the sine of angle A. I didn't put the angle symbol in there, but that's what it is. Now, that means also that the sine of angle A is equal to 1 over the cosecant of angle A. Okay? So if we have the cosecant of angle A, that is the same thing as saying 1 over the sine of angle A. And if I have the sine of angle A, that's the same thing as saying 1 over the cosecant of angle A. And also we have secant of angle A is equal to 1 over the cosine of angle A. And that follows that if I have the cosine of angle A, that will equal 1 over the secant of angle A. And of course, with the tangent, they say we have the cotangent of angle A, that is equal to 1 over the tangent of A. Then of course that follows that the tangent of A is equal to 1 over the cotangent of angle A. Now, they didn't give you this part on page 846. I'm just following it to its conclusion right here. All right. Now, when would we use all of these things? It all depends on what the problem is that we're given. So let's take an example here on page 848 near the bottom. Determine cosecant, secant, and cotangent functions. Okay. Now, you do not have on your calculator a button for cotangent, cosecant, and secant. That negative sign above the sine, the cotangent, and the negative sign above the sine, the cosine, and the tangent, that does not mean inverse, okay? Most of the time when you're looking at something, and let's say you have like 1 over 2, and then that's raised to the negative power, that means that's the inverse of it, which means it's 2 over 1, all right? In this case, that little symbol that you see above the sine, the cosine, and the tangent does not mean the inverse. We're going to talk more detail about that in a moment. Okay, so let's look at the bottom of page 848. It doesn't really matter. Let's look at number 7. It says that the cosecant of 27 degrees, and we need to find that. So if I have the cosecant of 27 degrees, that means that is equal to 1 over the sine of 27 degrees. So in my calculator, I have this in my calculator, if I can find it. It's right here. So I will just type in, I've got a fraction bar here, so this is how I'm going to do it. If you don't have a fraction bar, you can just say, and I'll do it without a fraction bar. This is what I'll do. I'll just hit 1, and then hit the divide by sign, and then, what is it? And then I will hit sine 27. And this is what it looks like on my calculator. And then I will hit enter, and it is 2.202-ish. So I will round that to 2.203. All right. So let's take a look at another one. Let's look at 14. All right. 14 says that secant of 77.08 degrees, that is equal to 1 over cosine of 77.08 0.08 degrees. Now, there's another way you can do this. You don't need to use the 1 over. You can use your inverse button on your calculator. I don't even know where mine is. Right there. No, that's not it. That's something else. Anyway, you'll have an inverse button. All scientific calculators have them. See, I use mine so little I can't even tell you where it is exactly. But it'll look something like this. The button, and it'll say 1 over x. That's one way of doing it. It could say 1 over n, or it could say x to the negative 1, or n to the negative 1. That's your inverse button. So you would just simply hit, if you were doing this problem that way, you could just simply hit cosine 77.08 and then hit your inverse button. If you don't know where it is, that's okay. You can just simply use it this way. You can just go this way with it. 1 divided by cosine 77.08, and I have 4.472. Now you might have noticed something here. You might not have, that's okay. We'll go into more detail on this in another lesson, but notice something here. When I did sine and cosine of a function, my answer, my number, was always less than 1. Cosine and sine will never be greater than 1. Cosecant and secant will always be greater than 1. Okay? So I say that so that you know that you might have made a mistake. So if I'm doing a problem and I say sine of some angle and I hit it and I get 3.8 or something like that, that's definitely going to be wrong. Maybe check your calculator to make sure that you're not in radians or anything like that. Or maybe, I think gradians and degrees are the 3 most common angles, angle measurements. Okay, so now let's take a look at the top of page 849. Angles of given functions. Now the second paragraph down, it says the term arc is often used as a prefix to any name of the trig functions. So that's when you look at your calculator and you see your sine button there, above that you'll see sine negative 1. This is said arc sine. This is sine, this is arc sine. Okay? We use the sine, cosine, and tangent buttons when we have the angle and we're looking for the ratio. We use the arc sine button when we have the ratio and we're looking for the angle. For example, let's say that I have a triangle here. Well, I do have one, it's right there. This is my reference angle. I don't know what that is. I need to find it. But let's say we're given this side as a 1 and this side as 2. Now I've already done this. I know that that right there should be 30 degrees because the opposite over the hypotenuse, if that is a 1-to-2 ratio, that should be 30. So putting it in my calculator, it should come up to be 30. So let's go ahead. Let me zoom in a little bit here to kind of show you what button I'm hitting. So right there, just above my sine button is the arc sine. Now that, on my calculator, there's several different colors of buttons that I've got this orangish colored one, a white one, and then there's some green ones. So that tells me what button I need to hit first. And right here, I got them both on there. This second function is the orange. So if I want to use any of these orange things, I hit that second function first. If I want to use one of the green ones, I hit the alpha button first. So I will hit the second function, and then the arc sign, and then that comes up on my calculator just like that. And then I will hit, for this, what I'll do is I'll hit a parenthesis and then 1 divided by 2, because it's 1 over 2. I can use my fraction bar, or I can just put 0.5. Then I hit enter, and 30 degrees is what it's showing me, which I already knew it should. So that means that I'm doing this properly. So let's say that now, instead of that, let's say I've got another, I better zoom out a little bit so you can see what I'm doing instead of so close. Now let's say I've got another triangle, and let's stick with sine for right now. And all of my triangles look like 30-degree angles. And let's say that I've got, oh, I don't know, let's make something up. My battery is dying. 2 over 7. Something like that, and I'm looking for that angle. So this is my reference angle, and 2 over 7, I will say arc sine 2 divided by 7. And, of course, arc sine 2 divided by 7. 16.6. So that angle right there is 16.6. My battery's dying. I will be right back. Okay, let's continue. We don't have a whole lot more in this section, but I didn't want to cut it short. Okay? So, arc sine is when you are looking for the angle when you're given the ratio of the opposite over the hypotenuse. Arc cosine is when you're looking for the angle and you're given the ratio of the adjacent over the hypotenuse. And then arc tangent would be you're looking for the angle when you're given the ratio of the opposite over the adjacent side. So arc when you're looking for the angle, and then if you're looking for the ratio and you have the angle, you just simply use the normal sine, cosine, tangent button. Okay, so let's look at the very bottom of page 849. It says, since the secant of A equals 1 over cosine of A, then cosine of A is equal to 1 over secant of A. And if I'm looking for the angle A, then that is the same thing as saying the arc cosine of 1 over secant A. So let's analyze that right here. So when I am looking for the angle, this is my unknown right here, okay? So what I'm looking for is the angle. I'm going to divide both sides by cosine. This is just a mathematical way of envisioning where all of this comes from. So what I have here then is A is equal to 1 over secant of the angle A, and then multiply that by 1 over cosine because I divided it. So when I invert this right here, remember your rules for exponents, okay? If I invert this and I pull this up into the numerator, I have to change the sign on the exponent. The exponent right now is just a positive 1. So if I invert that, I'm going to get cosine of negative 1 times 1 over secant A. Remember, because if they give you the secant of A, I don't have a button on my calculator that will take care of that. So I need to be able to use one of the buttons that does exist, which is this one right here. So I algebraically solved this for A. Now if you don't understand that, just understand they just straight out give it to you right here. They don't necessarily go through any of that. So let's look at an example of that. On the bottom of the page, oh, where are we going to be here? Page 850. Okay, determine the value of the angle. Let's just grab one. It doesn't matter. Let's use a secant one since that's what we were just talking about. Number 22. Number 22, it says, let me just use, I'm running out of paper here. So let me just grab this one. Ta-da, I erased most of it. Don't ignore all that. That was probably something I messed up on. Okay, so what did I say, 22. So secant of A is equal to 1.02353. Okay, so there's your secant. So what is the angle? Well, I don't have, like I said, I don't have a button on my calculator that has anything to do with secant. So I have to say that if this is true, then let me see, how do I want to rewrite this? This deals with the cosine. So I will say secant A is equal to 1 over cosine of A. So that means that cosine of A is equal to 1 over secant of A. Well, I can just write this as A equals arc cosine of 1 over secant of A, but I already know that the secant of A is this right here, so I'll just write that in there, 1.02353, like that. So I could put this in my calculator. And I can say the arc cosine, second function cosine, parenthesis, 1 divided by 1.02353, end parenthesis. You'll need to use parentheses. Some calculators give you the first parenthesis automatically. So if it does, you don't have to hit parentheses, but you do have to end the parentheses. I hit that. So this angle must be 12.31. No, 12.31 degrees. Okay, so let's take a look at a couple more here. Let's look at 24. It says the cotangent of angle A is equal to 2.898. All right, so there's a couple of different ways we can look at this. We can jump right straight to it if you want to, or I can say, okay, so that's true. So that means that the tangent of angle A is equal to 1 over the cotangent of angle A. And so what this means is that angle A is equal to the arctangent of 1 over cotangent of angle A, which we already know to be 2.89895. Trying to write around my computer's right there. Can't get to that. All right. Let's see here. So I will say second function, arctangent, hit the parenthesis, 1 divided by 2.89895, end parenthesis, 19.03 degrees for that one. Ta-da! Now let's take a look at some of these other ones, the way they've got them written on the bottom of page 850. They've got some that are written a little bit differently. For example, number 25, it says A equals arcsine 0.2953. So that one is already set up for you to hit in your calculator. You just hit arcsine. Of course, yours will look like sine raised to the -1 power, and then you put in the 0.2953. So those ones look differently, but that's what you're doing there with those. And the bottom ones on that same column are exactly the same thing. There's really nothing else. You just type them in your calculator the way they're shown. No. Let's do, now we already have that. What's another one? Number 18, let's take a look at number 18. Yep. Cosecant, learn how to write it, of angle A is equal to 2.08363. So I'm just going to jump right to it. So I know that what I'm going to do here, this is sine, so I'm going to say arcsine. So angle A equals arcsine of 1 over 2.0, oops, it should have been 0, 8363. Just like that. Because I knew that cosecant already was that, so I can just substitute it in. So second function, arcsine, parenthesis, 1 divided by 2.08363, end parenthesis. So that angle is 28.7 degrees.